Boy, do we have a treat for you today. I know every parent listening to this podcast wants their kids to know that they are unconditionally loved. I mean, don't you hope that your kids grow up someday and say, my parents just unconditionally love me. They love me for who I was and not for what I did. And I know that that's our heart. That's our goal with our kids. And we definitely mess it up so often with the techniques that we use or ways in which we approach situations. And that's why I wanted to bring on a powerful voice in this area. His name is Alfie Kohn. And not only has he written many, many books that are fantastic, but he's been on the Oprah show on a couple occasions. He's been on the Today Show. He is a speaker that goes all throughout the country, throughout the world, talking about the topic of parenting. And specifically, he's got a fantastic book called Unconditional Parenting, another powerful book called Punished by Rewards, which really speaks to about how we use rewards in just the same way we use punishments, and how that's going on in classrooms all over the country, and how it can really undermine these goals that we have as parents to raise kids that really believe they are unconditionally loved. And so we wanted to let him have a moment to really connect with you, our listeners, and for you to get this, like, it's a gift to be able to talk to some of these people. We feel just so blessed that we get to connect with somebody like him and hear his passion about raising children differently in this world so that they end up becoming these humans who aren't insecure and aren't wrapped up in this need to just comply to earn love. And I know that's not something you want either. And so I hope you have a pen and paper ready to take some notes, really ready to like listen and just absorb the wisdom that he's going to share, because it's definitely there's going to be some truth bombs that he's going to drop that are really going to shake you and kind of rock your world. And so get ready for that. And take a moment real quick to pause, to go ahead and rate and review this podcast. If this one really impacts you, would love for you to comment about how this podcast is impacting you. Share it, send it to other people so they can also have access to these fantastic voices in this arena. And I know you're going to enjoy this conversation.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
The Art of Raising Humans is a podcast designed to support, equip, and encourage parents on how to create long-lasting, deeply connected relationships with their kids that's free from fear and shame. Come join us on the journey. Hello and welcome to The Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle.
Hi there, I'm Sara.
And today, Sara, we've got a fantastic guest.
Yes, I'm very excited.
We're very, very excited about it's somebody who early on in my parenting journey, his books were very influential in how I saw parenting, how I approached our kids. Yes. I remember how I met him was through Dr. Markham when I was training with Dr. Laura Markham, and Dr. Markham said, this is a book we have to read. And we read Unconditional Parenting, and that's a great book. So without further ado, I want our audience to be able to meet you. So welcome to the podcast, Mr. Kohn.
Glad to be here.
And I want to jump right into this. About that title. That title just grabbed my heart as a new dad. When you titled that Unconditional Parenting, this idea of actually unconditionally loving your kid. I know Sara and I really had that as a goal, really thought that we were doing it. But then as I was reading your book and realizing, even though we had chosen not to spank, we weren't going to do that. We had chosen to get away from punishments. There was still all these ways in which I think we were still being very conditional. So I'd love for you to talk about this concept of being an unconditional parenting, a parent. Where did that come from for you, and why are you passionate about that?
Well, the premise here is that it's not enough to love your child or even to love your child a lot, because from the recipient's point of view, there are different kinds of love. This is true with other things too. For example, motivation. It's not just the case that you need a lot of motivation. The question, according to psychologists, is whether your motivation is intrinsic, which means you do something because you get a kick out of it and find it valuable in its own right, or extrinsic, which means you're doing it in order to, say, get a reward. So with love, the relevant distinction I want to emphasize is between conditional love, in which a child, for example, has to jump through hoops in order to feel cared about. There are conditions or contingencies placed on that care. And on the other hand, unconditional love, which means we love you for who you are, not for what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So that there are no strings attached.
Yeah.
And it's indeed when kids are in trouble in some way, when they act out in ways that are troubling, that's when they most need to know that our love is not being turned off, like as if it's a faucet valve. And that doesn't mean that we don't work with them to solve problems. It doesn't mean that we are uncritical of all actions they enact. But it does mean that they know, not just that we say, but that they experience the idea that mom and dad absolutely still love me regardless of this, of what I've done, and that they never feel as if they have to impress us or please us in order to receive that care. And there's a fair amount of research demonstrating that when conditions are placed, or kids feel that there are conditions placed, that their parents really get excited when they do well in school, or in sports, or that they hide their negative emotions, or that they're well behaved or whatever. That when they feel they have to do this to get that creates a sense where they have to pretend to be someone they're not. And psychologically speaking, the implications for healthy flourishing are not great.
Can I tell you, it was actually your writing and unconditional parenting that helped me begin to see this in how I was parenting, that I felt like I was doing so many things really well. But I did notice that when my kids were doing things I asked quickly, when they were performing well in sports, I just noticed that love was more easy for them to access. I wanted to, like, let's go out and get ice cream. Let's go out and do it. And then when they weren't, I noticed that even though I didn't believe punishment worked, I more instinctually wanted to take it away. I wanted to say, you know what? No, we're not doing that. I even found it harder to be loving, meaning like showing them tenderness, showing them affection. And it was, I found myself like this. I was so confused about where that was coming from. And I remember the one time we put my daughter in a timeout. And that was the only time we ever did it. And she was maybe three or 4 years old. And I remember she told Sarah after that incident, and I thought I was doing it to help her, right? To help her go get her emotions under control. And I remember she told Sarah, said to Mom, I feel like Dad's telling me he doesn't want to be with me unless I act good. And
she picked it up before you did, but at least you had the courage to not just stave that off as being too unsettling or threatening, which many people do, and to gulp and to say, wow, this is not what I'm looking for in terms of being a parent. Yeah. Because when kids feel, I have to do this for Dad to be really excited about me, to care about me, to smile, to hug me, and so on, they start to internalize that and feel it's not just that I'm not loved when I'm acting in this way, it's that I'm not lovable, and that they put those conditions of worth on themselves. And I guess the other thing you sort of figured out is, first of all, that time out is a very cruel punishment, and that the relevant question is not, do I make children feel terrible by hitting them, or do I make them feel terrible by physically distancing myself from them? Thank goodness those aren't the only two options. Yes. And then the next step is to realize the alternatives aren't limited to punishing kids, making them miserable on purpose to teach them a lesson, or doing nothing. But the step after that is to realize that rewards are no better than punishments. Saying to kids, do this, or here's what I'm going to do to you, is not that different from saying to them, do what I want, and here's what I'll give you. They're both ways of doing things to children rather than working with them. So the flip side of timeout, which should be called forcible isolation of children when they need us most, but we prefer these euphemisms, that make us feel better about making kids feel bad. The euphemism for the whole category that we use, because we don't like the word punishment, we don't want to think of ourselves as punitive people, is we call them consequences, or even pretend they're logical consequences. But the flip side of that, rewards, is still conditional, and it's still about doing too. If we're saying to them, jump through my hoops, and I'll take you out for ice cream, to use your example, or give you a sticker or a gold star, or I'll just get more excited and loving. I mean, you understand here, in case I want to be very clear, the problem is not with ice cream, and it's certainly not with loving.
Yeah.
The problem is with using the things that kids want or need as levers to manipulate them. Praise, when we make the reward verbal, give them a verbal doggy biscuit. Good job. I really like the way you... That is not about supporting kids. That's not about loving them. That's about controlling them, just like the flip side of punishment is.
Yeah, I'm like tearing up listening to this. I love it. I think I hear from kids. I remember feeling this as a child, even with rewards. It's so confusing because I remember there was a quiet seat prize if you were really quiet, and I was super quiet. And I remember not getting the reward because this other kid who normally wasn't quiet was quieter that day. And it was so confusing because I thought, but I was quiet. But then they got there. And my daughter just the other day came home, and she was in a situation where, they were picking out certain kids who had done certain things right and giving them rewards. And she voiced the same thing. I don't understand. I did it too. And the reward, even the reward side where they're trying to help or trying to control their behaviors, leaves kids so confused about what they actually need to do because the reward is this ever-changing thing.
Well, even if it was done in a way where they weren't confused and they were very clear, it's still poisonous. In the example you gave, there are 3 separate problems with this. One is the use of a reward, a controlling mechanism, not to bring kids in on the conversation about, how do we want our classroom to be and how can we get there? The kind of class meetings, democratic, collaborative teaching that helps kids to become caring, compassionate, thoughtful people, independent thinkers, etc. No, it's about treating them like pets. Here's the doggy biscuit you get if you do whatever the person with the power demands. That's problem number 1, reward. Problem number 2 is this teacher has taken something terrible and made it even worse by turning it not into a reward, what's worse than a reward? An award. An award is a reward that has been made artificially scarce so that if that kid gets it, your kid can't. Now you have the arsenic of extrinsic motivation combined with the strychnine of competition so that the kids have been pitted against one another, and other people are obstacles to their own success. That's where I think the confusion part came. Hey, I met your criteria. I was quiet. How come I didn't get it? And the answer is, you weren't as quiet as that comatose kid over there. So she's made worse than a reward is to create competition. So it's about defeating the other kids. But now we get to problem number 3, and that's not the method, it's the goal. The objective here, what the teacher is looking for, is using the reward or award to achieve, is not about helping kids to become good people or good learners. It's about silence. The teacher's goal is mindless obedience, not learning. So it's like you the worst of both worlds, a truly manipulative, dehumanizing method combined with a truly obnoxious and appalling objective.
Yeah, that's so good. I actually remember, with my oldest daughter too, she had this insight that you're saying early on. I remember she went to this daycare a few days a week, and as I was taking her to the daycare, she said to me, she said, "Dad, I don't feel really safe around my teacher." And I said, "Oh, it's because she's yelling at you?" Or she said, No, she's actually very nice." She said, "But what she does is whenever this one kid, we'll just call him Jack, is acting up, she'll say, 'I like how Abby is sitting.'
Oh,
I
right,
like how
right. The
Abby is
public
doing
praise.
this." Yeah. And then she says, "Then I see Jack looks at me and Jack doesn't like me. Like Jack is getting mad." She says, "I feel like she's using me against Jack." And
Wow,
yeah, so
your kid is very
yeah,
observant.
yeah, and that's when I knew. I thought, "Oh my goodness, that is happening." That's so. It wasn't that she didn't feel like physically safe. She felt like there was some emotional lack of safety there, where she's turning a kid, like taking my daughter's quote unquote good behavior and using it as a weapon against Jack,
Exactly.
you know.
That's right. I tell teachers all the time, if you can't get over your need to praise kids, because it's you who needs to say it, not kids who need to hear it. This doesn't help with their psychological growth. But if you have to praise kids, for God's sake, do it in private. If you do it in public, then the masks are off. This was never about helping the children in any way. It was always about using one kid to get what you want from the other. It doesn't get more manipulative than that. Kudos for your daughter. Is that her name is Abby?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So is my daughter's name is Abby too.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And she's also very perceptive about
Nice. What are the objections that you run into in all your speaking and what are typically the objections that people give to not wanting to let go of tools such as punishment and rewards?
Well, they turn out to be objections based on fear. And sometimes the fear is of, I don't know enough of how to solve problems that come up with kids by working with them. This is all I know. What else am I supposed to do? Which is reasonable, especially if you yourself were raised and taught this way. That's a reasonable question. Sometimes it's based on a really dark view of kids, and by extension of human nature. I find that the people with the squeakiest voices, with the constant "good job," often have the darkest view of children, particularly when they praise kids for being nice, for doing something decent, because the implication is, well, if they acted that way, it must have been a fluke, and they would certainly never do it again unless I give them the artificial inducement of doing it to get a patronizing pat on the head. So I like to invite people to think about their fears, but also their view of children and human nature, and to think about the way they were raised, because on some level, and people can't always articulate this or face up to it, if you take in and accept this kind of critique of traditional parenting and teaching, you are raising very troubling questions, because we have a strong unconscious need to believe that whatever our parents did to us, they did, for the best of reasons and out of love. And if you're telling me there's a problem with the practice, on some level, you're making me face up to the difficult questions about whether that's really true. So sometimes the pushback is, it often amounts to clamping your hands over your ears and going, la, 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 I can't hear this.
Yeah.
Even though what they're saying is something like, well, that sounds nice in theory.
Yeah.
I tend to find the people who say things like that really don't even like the theory.
Yeah.
But, my kid is, or you haven't met my class, or it's unrealistic to think, et cetera. None of this is true, because I have watched many, many parents and many, many wonderful classroom teachers who never praise or give gold stars or grades, who would quit and go into another line of work before they would do something as destructive as a timeout or some other punitive approach. And I'm here to tell you that the experience that I've acquired watching so many wonderful parents and teachers perfectly complements the research literature that I review in my books, demonstrating that it's not only possible to completely do without rewards and punishments, but it is far preferable. And the more ambitious your goals for your kids, the more powerful it is to move beyond this approach. But people are frightened and unsettled by this, and so they claim it won't work, or at least it won't work under these circumstances or with these kids. And so it takes a fair amount of gumption to look at yourself and the things you've been doing in the way that I think you just described having done with your daughter, and say, well, is that practice with those results really consistent with what I hope my child becomes?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true, especially if you grew up with a certain style of being how you were raised, punishment, reward.
Yep.
And it's so hard to even just look at the other side, to consider, could that have been wrong? Could that have been maybe not the best idea? And
Right.
because it's so ingrained in you. And then, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, and then the next step to even consider, if I lay these things down, I feel lost.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah.
How can I move forward?
Yeah.
And if other people around you haven't questioned these basic premises, they're still just tweaking the details of how you punish, like make sure you follow through on the threat, or don't use food as a reward, use this as a reward. All these are ways of just ignoring the big questions here. But if you're surrounded by people who not only accept traditional approaches, doing two, but expect it and look at you cockeyed if you don't do it, then you have this strong pressure, and you may get that from complete strangers or from your own parents or in-laws, or if you're a teacher, your colleagues or administrators, and it requires you to swim against the tide in a very controlling culture. It's really hard to do that. I mean, I like explanations that are more easily remedied, and I think for some people it's true that they've just been taught, that you shouldn't spank, you should use a timeout. Your pediatrician told you that. Or you shouldn't use punishments, you should use rewards. And no one has ever invited you to reflect on how all of these are variations of the same thing. Or no one's ever distinguished for you between the method and the objective, which is why I always start my presentations that I give to parents and teachers by asking, what are your long-term goals for your kid or kids? How would you like them to turn out years from now? And I invite people to come up with a word or a phrase that captures how I'd really like my kids to turn out. And everywhere I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times all over the world, and I get the same kind of answers everywhere I go. You can imagine what they are, what people say. And then what I do for a living is I say to people, in effect, you say you want this, so how come you're doing that? Given the research and experience demonstrating that is getting in the way of what you want, never mind what I want.
Yeah. So that leads me to my final question as we're wrapping up the interview is, it seems like what you would suggest listeners to do if they're listening to this, and I think a big hang up, like you were mentioning, is they just don't have an imagination of what it could look like to parent or to even have a classroom that isn't somehow controlled through fear and through punishment, through these methods. They can't imagine it. So part of even, I think, what we do on the podcast and your work is just to start, like, there are kids all over the world being raised without these things, and it's going awesome. It's swimmingly working,
right.
So it sounds like what you would suggest is the first step for listeners who are saying, fine, I'm sold. I do want to, move away from these things, but how do I start that? How do I start that conversation with my spouse or with my kids? And it sounds like one of those things you said is, well, start using your imagination to think about how you want your kid to grow up. Well, what is it? How would you describe them? And then how are we going to get there, right?
How are we going to get there? It takes longer, obviously. And I'm very wary of people who offer very specific scripts. And I get emails on my website all the time from people saying, my kid did the following. I know I'm not supposed to use punishments and rewards. What do I do? And I have to say, I'm really sorry. I've never met you or your child. There's so much about the circumstances I don't know. It will play out differently. Now, in my books, the second half of most of my books are, sort of pivot from the what not to do and why to, in general terms, what should we be doing? And so I introduce concepts like perspective taking, which is where you imagine how what you're doing looks like from your child's point of view. And to think about how, does this feel unconditionally loving? Would it feel that way if somebody said that to me or did that to me, and so on? And to talk about bringing kids in on making decisions in a way that is consistent with their age and developmental capacities, which obviously isn't going to look the same at age 2 as it is at age 12. But even at age 2, kids need to have a sense of autonomy. Kids learn to make good decisions by making decisions, not by following directions. So if we do more asking and less telling in terms of figuring out how to solve the problem, we can move a long way toward doing this, to become more reflective, to look at things, to take a breath. I throw in the book some common scenarios, like dealing with tantrums or dealing with taking too long to get ready in the morning or whatever it is, and then also scenarios with older kids as well. But the broader idea is, don't just try to learn a new set of words I'm supposed to stand here and say this in the following tone of voice when my kid does that. If that kind of parenting book is or blog is disrespectful to both you and your parents. But the broad conceptions here of working with, of giving kids more choice, of looking at things from your child's point of view, can lead you to adapt those principles in ways that make sense in your family and that are always consistent with your long-term goals of helping your child to become a moral person and an independent thinker and whatever else is on your list of goals, rather than what most parenting practices, sadly, parenting advice that we get from a lot of experts, is designed to achieve, which is not moral sophistication or independent thought. It's designed to achieve compliance, period. So if you want a kid who's not just one who will do whatever powerful people in life tell her to do, then that informs your specific actions and words so that you're able to solve problems together, to see things kids do that are troubling as problems to be solved, not infractions to be consequenced, and to underlie all of this, to get back to where we started half an hour ago, is that sense that we don't just love them, but that love is unconditional.
Love that. That's so good. It's something that we say a lot that really ties into what you're saying is we talk about co-creating this life with your kid. And so inviting your kid into taking hand in hand, we're co-creating the family that we want with them, and we're co-creating this life that they want to live with them. And if we continue just to create it for them, it's probably going to be a life they don't want. So it's going to be a life that definitely lacks their input and influence.
Yes. Right, absolutely.
Yep. So I want to thank you so much for your time, your insight. It means the world to us that you spend this time. And I know the listeners very much can benefit from this. And you have so many great books, and we'll make sure we put that in the show notes for them to have access to these books because they've changed our lives. And I know they'll continue to change many parents' lives down the road.
Yes,
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for being on. Okay, I'm gonna pause it. Okay, I'm gonna pause it right now. Okay, real quick. So I'm pausing the recording. I just want to say, Mr. Kohn, that was amazing. I mean, many times we're over here in tears listening to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I want you to know, like, what we're doing in Tulsa, real quick, is we're professional counselors, and we have a private practice in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so what we're up against here is obviously a lot of religious. In the Bible Belt, where spanking is very much prevalent,
biblical,
very much.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we do here is when people go to get help for their kids is very much having a conversation about the concepts that you speak about and that Dr. Markham speaks about and other really intelligent speakers in these people in this space, to tell them, like, hey, I'm never gonna support you giving timeouts. I'm never gonna support you doing the rewards. I'm never gonna support any of that. So if you want real help for your kid, then I encourage you to come. Let me coach you on how to switch this. And it's really phenomenal.
Good for you. You're doing it where it most needs to be done because you're up against the additional very powerful impediment of religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And since we come from that background, we really I'm able to like speak some of that language, which really helps because that fear is really present. They think not only did their parents do it, but God wants them doing it too. And
right.
So anyway, so I just wanted to let you know, I'm saying when Dr. Markham, I did this training with her in 2016 to become a peaceful parenting coach with her. And she's the one who wrote Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, Peaceful Parent, Happy. So she very much spoke highly of you, and that helped me get into your work. And so we appreciate you being on. I want you to know we're advocates of you, and we are very passionate with our kids. Our kids are as well, about impacting this world to move away from punishment rewards. So just want to let you know.
That's nice to hear. Nice to hear. Yeah, I'm glad you're doing this kind of work.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Okay.
We'll
let you go. Okay. Have a wonderful day there in Boston. Okay. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Wow, what an amazing conversation with Alfie Kohn. I mean, so many times Sara and I were literally tearing up over his perspective on how kids could be treated, how we could raise them. And I would love to point you towards his books because they are so powerful. You will be so touched by his writing, and we'll put some links down below in the show notes. Would also like to point out, if you are on this journey and you're saying, how can I start this? You can definitely, there's two ways to do that. One is we'll put a link to our course, how to stop conflicts and how to stop power struggles and resolve conflicts, in our show notes. This is a video course we put together to help parents move away from punishment rewards and to actually approach power struggles and conflicts differently in their home. And second, you can also reach out to me if you say, man, I'd really like to do some parent coaching with you. Reach out to me at kyle@artofraisinghumans.com, and we can set up a Zoom call to just see what your needs are and how I can help you. So I hope you were as touched just as we were with this conversation with Alfie Kohn. And I hope it also encouraged you and gave you some hope that there is a different way to do this. You can co-create the family you've always wanted and that your kids have always wanted as well.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.